Does the problem of evil work in debunking God? Help Me Believe doesn't think so, but that doesn't really matter when you don't comprehend your own beliefs. Get in line and grab a seat, because things are about to get absurd. The problem of evil comes up a lot in atheist circles, and while I don't think it's the magic bullet that a lot seem to think that it is, certainly it is a problem for most Christians. So, Help Me Believe put out a video trying to debunk this argument, only proving that they not only don't understand the argument, but they don't really understand the implications of their own theology. Because thinking is hard, I guess. So here we go with the problem of evil and why, for its purposes, it works just fine.
One of the most common objections to God in general and Christianity in particular is the so-called problem of evil.
And that's because the problem of evil shows that the formulation you people have made up for your God is irrational on its face. Now, I want to point this out right up front because I think a lot of people misunderstand the problem of evil, both on the religious and the non-religious side. The problem of evil doesn't prove that no gods exist. It shows that the characteristics adopted by most Christians, the three omnis, omniscient, omnipotent, and omnibenevolent, these three characteristics simply cannot be squared with what we actually see in the real world. If you don't believe in these characteristics, this argument does not apply to you. It isn't an argument against God, it's an argument against a particular formulation of God. So let's see where this goes and see if he understands this.
How could an all-powerful, all-loving God allow evil? If he's all-loving, then he should want to stop it. And if he's all-powerful, then he has the ability to stop it. So the question is, why wouldn't he?
Now, I'm sure he's about to go into a rationalization on why what Christians purport to believe isn't really what Christians believe, which we all know is very commonplace. But let's look at this from outside of this little bubble. William Lane Craig believes that God isn't just omnibenevolent, but God is incapable of being anything but good. It goes against God's very nature to be evil in any way. So God is very limited in what he can do, which again is a direct contradiction with the supposed omnipotent characteristic. It is absolutely impossible for an entity to be all-powerful if there's anything at all that they can't do. And this is something that the religious don't want to talk about, but it poses a massive problem for them, as I'm sure we're going to see.
Well, first of all, if someone asks me this question and they're asking from a place of where they just experienced evil in their own life or suffering, this person doesn't need you to be a philosopher, they just need you to be a friend. And so perhaps an intellectual answer isn't the best way to go. Perhaps we should just be there for them in their time of loss.
Okay, sure, maybe. But that's rarely how this question comes up, so that's really just a dodge. I do want to point something out here that the religious absolutely do not want to acknowledge, and that is that all of these characteristics, in fact, all characteristics ascribed to God by Christians, all of them are just made up. Every single last one of them. Because I don't care how you rationalize any of this, you can't actually test any of it to see if it's true. You don't have God to go study and see what he's really like. You can pretend that God is a nice guy, but how do you actually know that? How do you actually know anything about God? It's in a book? Well, how did the people who wrote the book know that? Where did they get the information? And how was it objectively tested? How would you even go about objectively testing anything about a God that is arbitrarily defined as beyond the ability to rationally evaluate? So, anything that they say about God, it's all belief. It's just blind faith. It's all made up because there's no conceivable way that it couldn't have been. So we need to keep that in mind as we continue.
But if this person is simply making an objection to the existence of God, I would say, first of all, you're not making an objection to the existence of God. You're just making an objection to the goodness of God.
And that's very true, as I already pointed out. But it does say something about the existence of any potential God with those characteristics. You can't say that no God exists with this argument, but you can say that this particular formulation of God cannot exist given the world that we find ourselves in.
Because there's no reason that God couldn't still exist and not care about the evil in the world. Now, I don't think that's the case, but there's no logical reason why that couldn't be the case. There could be a God that's more in line with the deistic view, and that would still be logically possible. So it's not an objection to the existence of God. It would be an objection to the existence of the God of the Bible, because the God of the Bible is supposed to be good.
But that's not the God you believe in, nor is it the God that you're pushing. It doesn't say a thing about a deistic God, or an evil God, or an impotent God, or any other formulation except the God that most Christians claim to believe in. So it's a perfectly valid objection to your God. And you say, well, it doesn't prove anything about the existence of Zeus. Well, no, it doesn't. But I'm not talking to a Zeus advocate, am I? I'm talking to you, and you are pushing the idea of this God. If you want your God not to be the victim of this argument, change your views on your God.
Secondly, people who raise this objection leave out a key component of the God of the Bible, which is he's also all-knowing. He's not just all good and all-powerful. He's also all-knowing. This is God's omniscience.
We don't forget it. In fact, it plays an important role in the argument. Christians can't say that God didn't know what would happen if he did what he did. They can't say that God didn't know that man would perform evil because God supposedly knows absolutely everything with perfect clarity from the beginning of existence. So God did what he did, knowing full well the consequences, and he did it anyway.
We see things from a finite perspective. We're unable to see into the future and see how this all may play out for a good purpose. But God is all-knowing. The perfect example of this is God's only Son, how he sent him to die on the cross. Jesus, an innocent man, was crucified on the cross, and God didn't save him from that.
You'd think God could have foreseen that and done things differently, wouldn't you? So let's do away with another objection that comes up all the time from the religious. The idea that God wanted man to have free will, so he had to give man the ability to do evil. And that's a problem. See, God not only created everything that we see, people and oceans and trees and forests and chirping birds and all that, but he also created all of the concepts that go along with the universe. God would also have to create things like the speed of light and the gravitational constant. But more than that, he'd have to create the very concept of gravity. Gravity means nothing if there's no idea of what gravity is. So not only would God have to create the concept of good, he'd have to create the concept of evil, which the Bible says he did in Isaiah 45:7. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. So God, being supposedly all-powerful, he could have created a universe without evil, where evil wasn't even a thing, where it simply didn't exist even conceptually. But he didn't. And he knew before he even started all of the ramifications that would come down the road from his conscious decision, and he did it anyhow. Free will is simply the ability to choose between available options without coercion. You can't choose to flap your arms and fly unaided, no matter how much you might want to. This is not a violation of your free will. So if God actually wanted a good world, then he could have created a world without evil. It would have saved him a whole lot of trouble and mass murders and eternal damnation. We'd still have the free will to choose between all of the options available, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. Funny how God screwed up, huh?
However, God used that for a good purpose. What was the good purpose? That he would bring about salvation for all of mankind.
Mankind wouldn't have needed salvation if God hadn't purposely damned us in the first place. Again, God knew all of this was going to happen, and he still did what he did. So either he wanted us to be damned, at which point he's not all good, or he didn't know, at which point he isn't all knowing, or he had no choice, at which point he isn't all powerful. Or he doesn't exist, which is the most likely conclusion we can draw.
So there's no reason that evil can't exist in the world and God could be using it for a good purpose.
That's a rationalization. There's no reason that Hitler couldn't have murdered the Jews, and there could have been some grand scheme, some master plan, some great purpose behind it, but we just ruined it all because we dared to take down the Third Reich. Yeah, you can't have it both ways.
And lastly, I would point out that evil is actually an argument for the existence of God.
Apparently, God is a dick.
So if someone asks me, how could God allow evil? I would say, what do you mean by evil? Because on the atheistic worldview, there is no objective evil that's just out there somewhere. It's all just a subjective preference.
Which is totally irrelevant. The very fact that we can subjectively define evil at all, the very fact that you think that we need salvation at all, that proves that God screwed up. Because otherwise, you have to justify why God would think this giant game was necessary in the first place. He creates people on purpose that don't know that disobeying God is wrong. It says so in the Bible. So, hey, when they do, this God that knew that they were going to do it in the first place, he punishes them for doing something that in reality is his fault. In fact, he punishes all of humanity with original sin, such that we're all damaged goods for all of eternity for something we didn't even do. From there, it becomes a comedy of errors. He murders 99% of the planet in a great flood when he could have just magically corrected his mistake, but no, he kills virtually everyone, and it isn't long before it all starts going sideways again. So he arbitrarily picks one group of humans to be his people, and those people repeatedly go off and worship other gods, screw up, commit genocide in his name, so he decides to send himself down to Earth to get slaughtered, knowing full well that it isn't going to work, and the sin is going to continue unabated. Besides, he really isn't going to forgive anyone's sins anyway, because if he did, there would be no more sin and no more need to kiss his ass and beg for forgiveness. But don't tell anybody that because, logic. And even if you want to pretend that God still holds people accountable for new sins we commit, why is there still original sin? How does anyone in their right mind rationalize this? This God of yours is a joke. A brain-dead wombat could have done a better job. And you worship this thing?
And you may not prefer this, but it doesn't make it objectively evil.
Hey, you're the one with the objectivity fetish here. Nobody else cares if it's objectively evil or subjectively evil. It's still evil. But this is just a means to rationalize your way around the facts because they get in the way of your feelings.
So on atheism, there is no objective evil, and so if you do see objective evil, then you are making an argument for the existence of God.
Who said anything about objective evil but you? Scarecrow, meet Strawman.
So in summary, if someone's asking this question because they've just experienced suffering in their own life, they don't need a philosopher, they just need a friend.
Hopefully, you're a better friend than a philosopher, because damn.
Secondly, this is not an objection to the existence of God, it's an objection to the goodness of God.
It is an objection to the existence of your God. Maybe you should stop having such a stupid, irrational God.
And thirdly, evil actually proves the existence of God and does not disprove it.
Spin like your life depends on it.
Yay! Good job!
This is The Argument from Evil. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel for more.
If this is the best you can do, why bother? But honestly, this is how all apologists fare, because none of them are trying to rationally justify their beliefs. They're just trying to figure out how to misdirect the audience so they don't see all of the stupidity they believe. The argument from evil isn't proof of no God, but it's damn good proof that the God that most Christians believe in makes no sense of any kind. But it isn't like these people care because it's all feelings, no facts, all emotions, no intellect. And the more you look at videos like this, videos like everything that I go after on this channel, the more blatantly obvious it becomes how intellectually empty these beliefs actually are. How these people can be so utterly blind that they can't see the clear and obvious problems right in front of their faces is beyond me. They don't see it because they don't want to see it. They won't reach that conclusion because they aren't reaching any conclusions. This is smoke and mirrors set up in an attempt to convince the skeptical that they've bothered thinking about their beliefs at all, when in fact, they haven't. They're not thinking about this. They hold beliefs that cannot change based on blind faith and irrational emotion, and this is all misdirection to keep the skeptics among us from pointing out just how silly it all is. But the skeptics know. We can see right through their stupidity, and while it might bamboozle some people, it doesn't bamboozle us, and we're only too happy to point out how ridiculous it all is. And then they complain that we're mean. Yes, we're mean. We're mean to the gullible and ridiculous. And we should be, because that's how we improve as a species. And after this, we could use a lot more of that.